Hey everybody, and welcome back to the IzzyVerse. I am very happy to have with me as our guest Joe St. Pierre. I'm going to introduce him in a couple of seconds here, but before I do that, I have a lot to talk about. It's a lot of stuff going on in the next couple of weeks that I'm really excited to share with you. First and foremost, starting with this weekend on Saturday is the Spring Renewal Gaming and Art Show. This is going to be in association with Tokyo Bronx. As you know, I do a lot of work with them, as well as the Bronx Gaming Network. And what they're going to be doing is they're going to do a special youth competition. And afterwards, we're going to have an evening art auction. I actually have one of my pieces that's going to be there that I'm working on to provide is a free event. So go check it out, 1017 Home Street in the Bronx. Admission is absolutely free. Go ahead and check it out. Also, this coming Monday, for those of you who have kids that watch TV shows like I'm trying to remember the name now. I forgot the name. But if you love Brad Meltzer's books, the artist behind Brad Meltzer's book, Chris Eliupios, he's going to be joining us and he's going to talk a little bit about his art style and how he has worked with Brad Meltzer for a lot of projects and worked in comics. Also, I'd like to talk a little bit to you guys about the Bronx Comic Book Day, Free Comic Book Day, May 7th. I'm going to be doing a tour around numerous comic book shops. We're going to be talking to a lot of the shop owners. I'm going to be showing some of the books that are coming out. There's a lot of stuff coming out on Free Comic Book Day. I'm excited about that. And if you ever want to see me and meet me, come out to the first show on May 14th and the 15th that weekend. I'm going to be in CradleCon. I'm going to be in Long Island, New York. Cradle of Aviation Museum, cradlecon.com. I just made it in. I'm going to be there with my pal Nate Melendez, who was actually in the show. Fantastic artist. And we're going to be giving out stuff, food prizes, all that fun stuff. Also, coming in June 11th, is going back to the Bronx Comic Book Show. I'm going to be there as well. And I'm going to be giving out a lot of stuff there as well. In fact, I met our guest in the previous Bronx Art Show, and I'll be there as well. And as always, I love to support my local comic book shop, starting with Squiggy's Dugout. That's the first one who opened their doors for me. If you ever need a shop and you're in the New Rochelle area, go out to Swiggy's Dugout. Also, Collector Cave. There's two locations. There's one in the Bronx on Middletown Road, and there's another one in Ridge Hill. Go out there, say what's up, say hi to the guys. They have some tremendous comic book shop. The one in Ridge Hill is absolutely beautiful, and the one in the Bronx is a great shop as well. Finally, this week I managed to go to a new shop over in Dobbs Ferry, NYHC, so New York Hardcore Comics in Dobbs Ferry. Fantastic place. Again, another nice little small shop, but it has that nice comic book feel. And the guys who are running the shows are absolutely great people. So go check it out if you're looking for a comic book shop in Dobbs Ferry. And those are my Westchester County stores. With me now, I'm going to introduce to you my guest for today. He has done work in Valiant Comics. He's done work at DC Comics. He's done work with Venom and Spider-Man 2099. And most recently, he has a new book that has going to open a Kickstarter. We'll talk a little bit about the Kickstarter. I'm going to welcome to the show Joe St. Pierre. How you doing, man?
What's up, Busy? How are you?
Good, man. So I was looking at your work and I see all the stuff you worked on there. And more importantly, I was looking at the Valiant stuff. And I was like, man, that's going back for me. That was that era of Valiant was such an amazing era. And I
Mhm.
can't wait to talk a little bit about it. But before we do that, man, let's talk a little bit about the question I ask all my artists and writers and anybody who's into comics is why comics? How do you get started? And what drew you into comics as a general?
Wow. Started very early. It's hard to like pinpoint a specific event or anything like that, but I do have photos of me as young as 4 years old holding comics in my hand. I had two grandmothers growing up, and they both kind of fed me comics on the way. And my dad would take me to the store occasionally, and I just seemed to gravitate towards the colors and stuff like that. And I started reading very young. I mean, I learned how to read through comic books, so I was just I pretty much ate my comics back then. You know, it was Bugs Bunny and Spider-Man and you know, Richie Rich, all that stuff. I was reading it all at the time.
Any character in particular that was like your favorite growing up as a kid?
Oh yeah, Spider-Man was my guy. Yeah, very early in life, I decided that I was going to draw Spider-Man comics as a profession, and I got my first rejection letter from Marvel Comics when I was 10 years old, and I still have it.
I'm just curious, what would something like that say? Was it like a rejection letter not knowing that you were 10, or was it a rejection letter knowing you were 10?
You know, I gotta say the wording was very discreet. That, you know, it was encouraging, but something like "you're not quite ready right now." I don't have the letter handy. I'll have to dig it up. But it was something like, you know, in a few years maybe you'll be ready. You know, that kind of thing. It was encouraging, but I was all set to start working, so it was disappointing for me.
Next Jim Shooter, right? You.
Yeah, yeah, totally, totally.
Speaking of Jim Shooter, he was very popular in the 90s in regards to, he was popular before the 90s, obviously.
Mhm.
Started very early in
Sure.
his career, but he was very
Sure.
popular in the 90s with Valiant Comics, right?
Mhm.
Valiant Comics is, at that particular time period, was extremely popular. One thing I always noticed about Valiant was the art style. They kind of had a house style to it, and you're definitely part of that group and that house style that they had. But what can you say made Valiant different from Marvel, DC? Because they were doing superhero comics, and they were doing classic characters that exist in the past, and then just put them into a universe, which
Mhm.
at the same time creating new characters.
Mhm.
So what can you tell me about your time with Valiant, and how it came about?
Um, well, that's a very broad question. So I'm wondering, let's see, let's talk about, well, Jim was my first boss. We can start there. I had taken to sending Xerox copies of samples of my pencil work to the various editors. And long story short, I sent out one batch of samples on a Monday, and I got a call on Wednesday from Don Perlin, who was my editor. So shortly after that, I was given Rye as a series, as a regular series. And so I still remember my first day with Jim and Bob Layton, and Jim kind of sat me down and he walked me through a comic book. It was like a mini personal lecture. He chose Captain America comic book that was drawn by Jack Kirby. And he kind of walked me through his process, like how he wanted stories told. He didn't want elaborate, strange panel shapes and things like that. He basically taught me storytelling 101 for comics. And I learned a lot from him during the time we were working together. He was a great teacher. I always thought it's better to learn the basics, you know, learn how to add 2 + 2 before you start talking about Einstein's theory, right? So Jim was very much about the basics, that every comic book is somebody's first comic book. So make sure that it's clear, make sure that it's legible, and you know, basically start from there and get elaborate, you know, start to bend the rules. I was always a kind of a rule bender, or a guy who questioned things a lot back in the day. So I was always trying to kind of move within the parameters of basic storytelling, and at the same time, if I could throw in, you know, an extreme close up or a crazy shot, I try to do that too. But Jim was very very interested in telling the story clearly, and very, you know, very straightforward. Put it that way.
Yeah, and one thing I do remember about Valiant Comics in particular, they were they weren't really about the artwork as much as it was the storytelling. The artwork was great. Don't get me wrong, and I think the artwork was fantastic in Valiant, but it wasn't like over the top, if you know what I
Right.
mean, right?
Right.
It was very conservative, if to say the least. The artwork was very conservative. The color palette was very it was almost bland in a way. It wasn't like vibrant. You know, I don't know if it was because of the time or how things were being colored at the time. Afterwards, when you start seeing books like Ninjak, Bloodshot, Turok in particular, I remember seeing that popular Bart Sears cover of Turok, that they started getting a little more, I guess you could say, spectacular or flashy. But when you were at the, like, really the one of the starting points of it, right? You came in and Valiant really wasn't as big as it eventually became, and you even been part of the Deathmate storyline. I see that you have a writing credit for Deathmate
Mm-hmm.
and stuff. So tell me a little bit about how that, obviously it's your first paying gig, right, as a professional, in a major comic book company. And again, my mind's going all over the place, but I'm just thinking about, what was the atmosphere in Valiant as far as style goes and everything of that nature?
Once again, a very broad question.
I try to keep it broad so I can give you as much as you can answer.
Well, I can speak a little to the history. Before Valiant did superhero stuff, they did a lot of like children's book comic type products that were focused on video games. So I don't know if you know that or not, but they did a lot of video game property comic books, and they were packaged in a different way. They weren't standard magazine comic books.
Mm-hmm.
And then they also kind of expanded beyond that into wrestling. They did like WWE style wrestlers in comics, and those were magazine size, like sold in magazine stores and things like that. And those didn't sell very well, and so Jim and the gang, they kind of fell back on what they knew, which was, for a lack of a better term, mainstream superhero comics, Marvel, DC, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So they went into competition with those two.
Mm-hmm.
So in regards to where I came in, it was fairly early in the superhero process. I'm not sure how long they were publishing the Nintendo comics or the wrestling comics, but I was like maybe the third or fourth series. Rye was a spin-off from Magnus, and I started with issue 1. So I was very early in the superhero publishing process, if that helps you at all.
Yeah, I think it was probably within a year or something like that, because you had Magnus, you had Solar, Archer and Armstrong, and those books were there, and then Secret Weapons started coming in, right, as well. So I'm thinking like the second or maybe second or third year is when we start seeing your work come into play. So then from there you go from Valiant, again, very conservative art style, but still clear, concise, easy to read, honestly. And with characters like Magnus and Solar, who they were popular characters. They were very sci-fi based characters that were popular in the early 60s, I want to say. And
60s and 70s.
Yeah, 60s and 70s. Golden Key, that was the name of the company. I knew it was in my head. And then again, as I mentioned, Turok, and they brought them all in. So they had some level of popularity. Afterwards, you did some work moving on, and I see that you did some work in DC. Your work in DC is not a huge library of work. Most of your work is the brunt's coming from Valiant and Marvel.
Yes.
But tell me a little bit about the difference between working in Valiant and now working with DC.
I'd rather speak to Marvel, if you don't mind, because Marvel just gave me more work. I mean, I did a ton of work for the Spider-Man and Venom offices, and an occasional fill-in at DC. So I've got much more attention from Marvel, and thank God for that, because it was my mission in life, like I said, since I was at least 10 years old, to draw Spider-Man. So that's where my focus was for most of my early life, and definitely during my career, was to hit the Spider-Man stuff. So the Valiant offices were very much like a studio kind of atmosphere, where a lot of times the writers and the artists and the inkers and the colorists, they all worked in the same space.
Mhm.
So we all kind of saw the process firsthand from start to finish.
Mhm.
And that was a great learning experience for me. You know, you could walk over to Bob's table and Bob would be inking a cover, you know, and you could watch him. He would often give lectures, you know, while he was inking, while he was working, on how to approach inking, spotting blacks, that kind of stuff. So it was very much like almost like an open school, and you were getting paid at the same time. So that's the ideal situation. I say this all the time. I learned more during a year at Valiant than I did in 4 years of art school.
Mhm.
Because art school for me, I had to work full time to pay my tuition. So my energy was divided between, you know, school and work. So
Mhm.
here I am plumped into the middle of Valiant Comics, right in the middle of the studio, and I'm getting paid as I learn.
Mhm.
So for me, that was ideal. So it's like, okay, I need to learn how to draw a shoulder today, you know, throw myself into an art class on Saturday, figure that stuff out. And the
Mhm.
next day, that shoulder is drawn better because it
Mhm.
was right there. I had to get the page done. I had to get the artwork done on time, whatever. And so it was like crash course, you know, for about a year. Learned a ton of stuff from that. Marvel, you know, Marvel, when I got to Marvel, I was an established professional. So, you know, when I went into the offices and got work there, it was basically like, here's your job, here's your script. Thank you very much. Take it home and bring the pages in, you know, twice a month or once a week, whenever I did that.
Mhm.
So also there wasn't the same creative energy at Marvel when I'm speaking for me in the 90s
Mhm.
now, right? It might be very different now. But at the time, you know, they didn't have inkers and colorists and writers working at
Mhm.
Marvel like right in the studio. It's mostly production stuff. So I can speak to. And DC, at least at the time, for me was a much quieter atmosphere. Every Marvel had a kind of central area with a ring of offices around it, and people would come out and in, you know, kind of like almost like a hive.
Mhm.
You know, people who needed production help would come out from their offices to get production help. Production was moving into the editors' offices to hand them stuff, whatever. So it had a hive kind of quality about it. It was very energetic. DC, my experience there at DC, most of the editors were in closed offices, and there was no central area, so it felt very quiet
Mhm.
and very kind of reserved when
Mhm.
when I was there. And again, that was in the 90s, so you know we're talking about 3 buildings ago probably, and they've since picked up and moved to the West Coast.
Yeah.
So things are much different now, I'm sure.
Yeah, I can only imagine. I used to only hear the stories of how cool it would be to go into those offices because of the, all the murals and everything that goes along
Yeah,
with it, right? So
yeah,
it was just one of those things that everybody talked about. I remember here, and it was not a long story, but the story of Alex Ross
yeah.
paintings being
Hmm.
plastered all over the place.
Hmm.
Um, wish I could go visit those offices now,
Yeah,
but
yeah. In the
but
lobby, they had like this giant mural in the
mhm,
lobby area, the waiting area, and it was this. Um, I do remember an Alex Ross one, but I also remember like a group. It was like a jam piece of like all the major DC characters drawn by different artists. So they may have replaced that one with the Alex Ross stuff.
mhm.
Yeah,
Awesome. Now, one
it
thing I
was
did
fun.
notice, again, as we talked about when I mentioned a little bit about the conservativeness in Valiant, once you end up in Marvel, your style just went poof. You know,
Hmm.
what caused the shift? And you did mention it a little bit, but what caused the shift from being very conservative into your style to be just out there? Like, you know, I look at this piece again. the Wolverine Venom piece, and you could just see the, you let loose, in other words, as
Yeah.
opposed to what you were doing in Valiant. So what caused that? Was it always in you, or was it as you became, as you said, you started growing, you started evolving and stuff?
Yeah, I think you kind of nailed it. You're very observant that way. I'm a big fan of the comic book art form, and although I'm very appreciative of what I learned from Jim, I learned the basics of comics from Jim, and I think it's very important and vital that people know the basics. But it was time for me to go beyond the basics. There's so much more to comic books than just storyboards. You know what I mean? You can explore type design within the image, type as part of the image. You can explore different kind of techniques of drawing to get a specific effect. You can play with color, you can play with lighting, and it was time for me to give that a shot. So I think what you're seeing corresponds with me getting work at Marvel, which is me. What if I did this? What if I tried this? What if I tried the title as part of the image and the characters interacting with the titles? That kind of stuff. And Marvel let me do that. So,
Yeah.
but again, not to disparage the basics, because I have also been involved with an educational comic book series called the Fabian Cousteau Expeditions. And this is basically a young readers, early readers kind of series. So I went right back to what, the basics, what Jim taught me. When you read from left to right, the person who speaks should be on the left, right? The 6-panel grid is, you may call it a conservative thing, but it's very, very easy to read. And so when you present something like this to a child or someone who's never read comics before, you'll probably have an easier time getting through the story than with some of the more advanced, strange panel layouts and stuff like that. So I'm still aware of the necessity for the basics, where the basics kind of suit the project.
Yeah, and you have some artists out there who keep it very simple,
Mm-hmm.
right? You have those that keep it very simple, and then you have those that go crazy, right? Sometimes I think of J.H. Williams, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if you ever had a chance to look at his book Echo Lands,
Oh, I haven't
it's
seen that.
insane.
Mm-hmm.
It's absolutely insane, and
Mm-hmm.
it's the type of book. I will say, if you seen, I'm sure you've probably seen some of his Batwoman stuff, right?
Batwoman and Promethea. I
Yeah,
used love
Prometheus, but
Promethea.
Echo
Mm-hmm.
Lance takes it to a completely different realm, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And one of the things he did in his art style, and I'll love to show it sometime, is he decided that each character had a distinctive style to it. But then
Yeah.
the panel layouts are something you've never seen before. It's just pure insanity. And
Mm-hmm.
not to mention that the book is widescreen. So
Yeah.
so
Cool.
it's not even it's stapled on the wide end. And as you read it, you literally read it like this.
He's
It's
just defying every
oh,
convention,
he's
isn't
breaking all the rules. And I don't know if it's gone too far,
Mm-hmm.
but I think he kept it just far enough. You know what I mean?
That's cool.
He went as far as he could take it. So definitely check it out if you ever get a chance. Everybody's listening. Echo Lands, go check it out.
I'll
Um,
have to look for that. That sounds
yeah,
very cool.
yeah, it is very cool. I recommend. Like, it's a crazy read, and you might
Mm-hmm.
have to read it multiple times to understand what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
But it's real. It's a book where it's art first, story
Mm-hmm.
second. I guess you
Mm-hmm.
could say.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the books I was looking at, and going back to the Venom piece, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we're looking at Venom Tooth and Nail, which is really a Venom Wolverine story. It's really a Venom story, but it's also Wolverine because he's in every issue, right?
Mm-hmm.
Talk to me a little bit about that story and what was it like doing that story.
Hmm. You're making me go back. I know that we've recently celebrated the 25th anniversary of that series. And
Wow.
so that was the yeah, time flies, right? And so It was also my best-selling gig at Marvel, although I had some work at Valiant that sold much better. Um, but I just love the Spider-Man cast, you know, and so the idea of working on any kind of Spider-Man books always, you know, always appeals.
Mhm. Yeah. And what about Wolverine? Drawing Wolverine?
Yeah, Wolverine. What can I say?
You had the two
My
most
top,
popular characters
yeah,
at that time, right?
yeah, top 10 of one of my favorite characters of all time. So,
Mhm.
yeah, it was great.
Yeah,
A
you
blast.
had a book where at its height it was Wolverine and Venom together
Yeah.
at their all-time greatest moments, right? You know,
Yes.
height. So yeah, kudos for getting that gig, right? That's like one of those dream gigs.
Yeah,
Um,
totally. That was fun.
yeah, you did say that you wanted to draw Spider-Man, but you ended up drawing Spider-Man 2099,
Hmm.
right? You did get
Hmm.
a chance to draw Spider-Man, but what was it like drawing the future version of Spider-Man and Miguel O'Hara?
Well, that was my first gig at Marvel. Joey Cavallari was the editor at the time, and he offered me. We started with a couple of fill-ins, and then he offered me the regular series after that. And so I've said that this on other podcasts too. But when it was my goal, Izzy, it was my goal. What was my goal, Izzy?
You said it earlier to draw Spider-Man.
It's to draw Spider-Man, and my Spider-Man is Peter Parker.
I
So
agreed. Same
with the
here.
red costume and the Ditko webs, you know, that kind of thing. So that's my Spider-Man. So when I was drawing Spidey 2099, I was drawing Miguel O'Hara like I would draw Peter Parker.
Mhm.
And I was drawing Spider-Man 2099 like I would draw Spider-Man modern day with the McFarlane webbing and all that kind of stuff. And that hadn't been done before that I know of. So I was just like so focused. I'm like, okay, you know, I'm in the outer green ring of the target. I need to get to the red bullseye, right?
Mhm.
And so that was my focus the whole time. So
Mhm.
and once we ran out of work on the 2099 office, I basically just walked into the Spider-Man office and they gave me a bunch of stuff there.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how it worked. Nowadays, I kind of appreciate the differences between the two characters, and you
Mhm.
can get a little darker, a little edgier with Spidey 2099 because he's
Mhm.
kind of from a kind of a bleak future, right?
Mhm.
And he's kind of got these claws instead of, you know, instead of sticking to walls, he kind of claws them. So he's a little edgier. And so when I draw him nowadays, I do get a lot of commission requests for him. He's a lot darker. I use a lot of black, and I try to make him look creepier.
Mhm.
So at the time, I wasn't thinking like that. So
But you appreciate what you end up doing afterwards, right? You
yeah,
end up looking
yeah.
at it and you thinking back, oh, not only did I get to do Spider-Man, I got to do Spider-Man 2099, I got to do Venom, I did you have some Carnage. So you pretty much you dominated all the Spider-Mans. Did you get a chance to do Miles at one time?
I don't think Miles was around
So
when I was.
he's the one that got away.
He got away. He got away.
But you got
Yeah,
all the Spider-Mans, right? Pretty much. So
pretty much.
congratulations on that one.
Thank you.
All right. And yeah, I just love the fact that with those books in particular, I just love, you know, again, the 90s was just crazy, especially when it came to art, right? When it came to
Hmm.
the art style in the 90s, everybody was
Hmm.
trying to it was an era where everybody was trying to outdo the other person in art style, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
Where sometimes story got affected as a result.
Oh yeah.
Um, right? Because you know, we got the boom of, you know,
Hmm.
Superman 75, and then everybody tried to buy comic books, and then poof.
Hmm.
And of course, Image and everything like that. But what was really cool about that era in comics was the fact that people were trying to be creative in their style. You know, your style in particular was very, you know, out there. It's exciting to look at, right?
Hmm.
I love looking at that. My personal favorite Venom is the type of Venom with his teeth, just his teeth. I'm not a big
Me
fan of
too.
the tongue coming out.
Oh,
It's
look at
it's
you. We're pals for life now.
yeah, well, because my Venom is McFarlane's version, right?
Exactly.
It's not too
Exactly.
crazy.
Hmm.
Um, so I didn't have a problem. You know, obviously Larson's Venom is the one that the tongue started going crazy
Yeah.
and stuff like that.
Yep.
So
Yep.
but I always loved that version of Venom.
Hmm.
That popular 316 book, which was one of my earlier books of Venom on top of Spider-Man McFarlane's cover, right?
Hmm.
Which they've done to bits and pieces. How many times they duplicated that picture,
Totally.
right? But it's such a great image of Venom. And your Venom in particular is such, it's very much channeling that version of Venom, which I love.
Yeah, I
Um,
wasn't a big fan. I kind of went back to the McFarlane look because they were drawing Eddie. He kind of looked heroic. He looked
mhm.
a little too handsome, and he
Mhm.
had this like mullet, which was kind of popular, I guess, at the time.
Yeah.
And I didn't reject that, but decided to go back to the original look. I like Eddie Brock as kind of more of a kind of less heroic looking character, and I wasn't a fan of the tongue either. So I actually did a scene in that mini series where where Wolverine slices Venom's tongue off, and
I
so
gotta look into it.
no one has ever noticed that or
I have to
mentioned
look
it
at.
to me.
Well, now I know I'm gonna look at, because
Yeah.
I was trying to get. I have a subscription to Marvel Unlimited,
Hmm.
and I was trying to actually get get the copies of the books and
Hmm.
to take a look at them, but it was so hard to get it. Like I got it, but
Hmm.
not the unlimited version. I got the traded paperback. I was like, no, I want the unlimited version so I can look at it right now. So I was having challenges. So I only have the covers, the cover pieces, and things like that.
Hmm.
All right, let's go ahead and talk a little bit more about, we talked about Spider-Man, we talked about Venom, we talked about Wolverine, we talked about Valiant Comics. Um, let's talk a little bit more about one of your books that you're promoting, the one that's right behind you,
Hmm.
and that is Zodiac. But before we do that, I'm gonna go ahead and play the video
Hmm.
of the Kickstarter, and
Okay.
you could go ahead and talk towards it. I'm gonna share it in right now. So
Okay.
let's go ahead and share that. But as we're doing that, talk to me a little bit about what is the new Zodiac Aquarius.
The new Zodiacs with an X is about 12 characters who can channel the cosmic energies of the Zodiac. So each character kind of manifests the energies in different ways. And so I'm kind of rolling out a maxi series of 12 issues, one for each sign. And I'm going to spotlight each character in each issue. So the very first edition of the new Zodiacs is the Aquarius character, who's essentially a teenage nobody who happens to be a brilliant hacker, and he steals something from a mega corporation that makes him the most wanted man on Earth. He has like a liquid metal, I call it a second skin, kind of like Terminator 2, has like this liquid metal that
Mhm.
covers his body, and it allows him to access the web psychically. So this is him right there. He's transforming. There's the young kind of, he's like a Spider-Man meets Captain America with the little Silver Surfer for coloring. He's a young teenager, the way Peter Parker started as a teenager. But nowadays, young kids are like so good with computers nowadays, right?
Mhm.
So he's like just like a natural hacker. And let's see, what else we got going on? And there he is in his super cyberpunk persona. That's what he looks like online.
I'm digging this art style.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it. The one
Yeah.
thing about you were talking about the 90s and stuff and how the art styles kind of went all over the place. And I totally agree with you about that. But my focus was always about story and art.
Mhm.
I started writing professionally when I was at Valiant. I co-created a series called Secret Weapons. And I wanted to continue that kind of writer artist kind of thought process. I think that's how I best express,
Mhm.
my own stuff. And so in 1997, also 25 years ago, I did an Image comic book that I co-created called Megahertz. And the Kickstarter also has a very special 25th anniversary full color special edition of that Megahertz comic book that's available as a reward level on the Kickstarter.
Yep.
So I'm going back to my first creator-owned project and then moving forward with my latest, with the new Zodiacs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you know, it looks great. I see that the first phase 2 is sold out. That's good.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm calling this phase 2 because I've already done a mini series with the new Zodiac's characters. The first issue sold out. And then I've done 2 graphic novels, which assembled the first 4 issues. And those both, I did 2 printings of those, and those are both sold out. So I'm relaunching, repackaging the series and relaunching, and I'm calling the relaunch phase 2. So if you have phase 1 product, hopefully that'll be worth money for you in the future if you're that kind of a collector.
Yeah, but it's, you know, I love having these books in particular. I love having indie books because, again, it gives the ability to do things differently with characters that you don't know what could happen to them, right? Anything goes with them, right? That's the beauty of an indie comic, right? Anything could happen, right? Obviously, in Marvel and DC, you could kill off Spider-Man. That, you know, we know that, but he'll be back in a couple of weeks or months, right? In some way or another. So, you know, now I know that the new Spider-Man that's going to be Scott Hanna, who I had on the show, and John Romita, who with Zeb Wells writing it. I know that has something to do with Green Goblin, so he's gonna have a glider and stuff like that. So it's very interesting. But yeah, I saw an image of that just the other day. But again, we'll get Peter Parker again. You know what I mean? We'll always get Peter Parker back. He'll never go away because we love him too damn much.
Well, that's one of the pluses of the franchise property, right? It's you'll always be able to revisit the things that made those characters most popular. You know, you get a change here or a change there, you get a costume change or an identity change, but, you know, like you said, a few months later, the cycle will return to the original tenets of what made the story successful to begin with, right? And so you're right, an indie project doesn't have those kind of requirements, you know. So when my characters die in the new Zodiacs, they'll probably stay dead unless I decide otherwise. But
yeah, and it's not like you're gonna get 1,000 letters saying we want this character back. If you did, that'd be great, right? Because that shows that awesome. 1,000 people are reading this book, right?
Yeah, I would take that. I would take that.
Right, but at the same time, it's like it's still your world, your control. You do what you want with it. A question I would like to have, being a creator-owned project, and you are doing the majority of the lifting for this work. What can you tell me as far as editing yourself, or do you get other people to help you in a process like that?
I don't have a specific editor like, oh, I write a script and send it to an editor. I don't do things like that.
Yeah, no traditional approach.
No, but I do. I trust myself pretty good, but I do listen to people's feedback. You know, a lot of people have come up to me and who have read the miniseries or the graphic novel, and they'll say, I really like, you know, the Aquarius character, and here's why. I really like that he does this, you know, that he's a kid, you know, that he's basically a punk kid. Or they'll say, I like his look. I get a lot of costume design compliments. So it's like, okay, I get an idea. I get a kind of bearing based on the feedback I get from fans. But I also have like some professional friends who are read it, and they'll tell me, you know, you should try this next time, or I like this. I don't remember being far off base on anything that I've done with the new Zodiacs, but I don't suppose anyone else would be able to tell that I was off base with my own characters.
Yeah. Like the way you draw this, the way you say this character's voice is not what it sounds to me. It's like, no, it's my character. I created him, right?
Yeah, exactly. So my process is pretty it's pretty fluid. Very often when I'm writing the story, I can see pictures, so I'm describing pictures in my scripts. And then while I'm drawing, the dialogue comes to me, so I write the dialogue on the side. You know, in the space outside the work area, I'll write dialogue while I'm drawing or inking. So I kind of go back and forth during the process, which is kind of cool. I like that.
As far as your medium goes, are you sticking to traditional pencil and ink, or you're using some digital to go with it?
Well, ever since I was a kid, I just, took pencil or pen to paper and just drew. So I still have that kind of instinct, and I still do that. But the work is colored in the computer and lettered in the computer. And especially with the Liberator, there may be some digital kind of enhancements and stuff that I'll do, in the computer. Just to kind of save time. I know the issue here that's on the Kickstarter. I drew like thousands of square pixels with pen and ink. Something I probably could have just done, in 5 seconds with Photoshop or something. Just lay pixels in. But I felt the need to like draw this out. I wanted the artwork to be complete in each stage: pencil, pen and ink, and then color, and then with effects and lettering and stuff like that. So I wanted each stage to stand alone, to be clear. I didn't want to have to rely on the computer to tell the story. Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, because I think of a character, like a Silver Surfer, for example, right? You could draw Silver Surfer, and one of my favorite Silver Surfer artists will be Rod Lim, right? Very distinct way of drawing Silver Surfer. And he's silver, right? So he's like a silver alloy style. And to draw him on pencil and to ink him is very different than if you were to do it through a digital medium, right? So if you were to take your iPad and start drawing with your iPad, using a program like Procreate to draw Silver Surfer, it will look very different than, let's just say, if you were to draw the same way Rod Lim drew it with pencil and then inked afterwards, right? There is a difference between the two. It's very clear to me as I'm looking at your work that it is pencil over inks rather than drawing from computer, which again, there's guys out there that do it through the computer, and there's nothing wrong with it. It's just another medium to do it. It's faster, I'll say that much. But it is a different feel to it, and it's something that you have to get used to, and you have to know when to do it and when not to do it. So especially with your character where it has technology as a big component of it, it will be, I guess it would be very easy to go to the iPad to say, what, let me draw it like this because this is how he looks. But I like the fact that you're keeping it very traditional. And that's great. That's awesome to hear that we still got pen and paper and we love it.
But I'm not averse to doing it in the computer. I do a lot of stuff digitally too. You probably can't tell that it still looks like my work. It doesn't look like painted, computer generated imagery or anything. But I do use the computer to do comics and stuff too. This particular book was all digital, done all digitally. But I don't know if someone looking at this would be able to tell. It doesn't have that super rendered, computer look. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But the computer is just a tool, and you express just like a pencil or a brush. You can express yourself any way you like with with the tool.
With that said, I think this was a great interview. I love talking to you about this stuff. I love talking one artist to another, especially when it comes to the progression, right? The progression of where you started over at Valiant to today. You're doing your own indie stuff. So it's really nice to see that progression, and then all those years of work. It's amazing how time flies. You throw 25th anniversary a couple of times here and there, and it just makes you think like, oh my goodness, I've been doing this long, right?
Since I was like 5 years old. I did get that job that I wanted when I was
and you got to do it. You got to do Spider-Man, and I see a couple of fans are out there. Really fun interview. Thank you, Ali M. And Ghost
It's
Critic also
Ali.
said it. It's Ali. Also, you know this guy,
I
Ali.
know that guy. Yeah, I know that guy. Very
Real
talented
serious
artist.
guy there, right? Look at that. Look
Yeah,
how serious.
he looks very serious in that picture.
And then we have Ghost Critic top 3 ghost videos. that's a
Okay.
that's a hell of a name, but it's
The
nice.
next New Zodiacs book is called New Zodiacs Pisces, and my Pisces character channels the cosmic energies in a way that allows her to communicate with the dead dropped on Earth. So she delivers spirits to whatever is beyond. So hopefully, Ghost Critic will check that one out.
Awesome. Yeah, because you have this one in particular was very tech savvy,
Mm-hmm.
tech oriented. Now we're going to go into the supernatural. That's
Yeah, we're going to get into
you're
horror.
going to get into your
Mm-hmm.
Teen Titans Marv Wolfman,
Yeah,
right?
buddy. Yeah,
Awesome. I'm looking forward to it, man. I can't wait to
totally.
see him. All
That
right.
sounds fun.
Tell them where we can find you, Joe.
You can go to joestpierre.com or newzodiacs with an X.com, and there are links to the Kickstarter there. So I'd appreciate your support, helping spread the new Z.
All right. Thank you, Joe, for being part of the IzzyVerse. I'm going to put you in the lobby right now so we can talk a little offline.
Okay,
but,
cool.
But thank you for joining us. And with that being said, this has been a great season. Again, thank you all for watching. Joe St. Pierre. Again, you can find him everywhere. He's on socials. You find him on joe.st Pierre. And don't forget to go check out his Kickstarter. He still has 14 days to go on his Kickstarter right here. It's doing great. Go ahead, leave a pledge out there. The link is going to be in the description soon. With that said, I just want to make sure that you guys know about this Saturday in the Bronx Spring Renewal Gaming Art Show. Go check that out. I will be there. I'll be part of it. I'll have a piece to auction off. So who knows? You may have one of my pieces. All right. And again, on Monday, Chris Eliopoulos. I can never get that last name, so I apologize in advance. That's the next show on Monday. Again, guys, it was great seeing you. I will see you next time on the IzzyVerse. Take care, everyone. Bye.